Jerami Grant is who we're talking about, and the whispers have turned to murmurs on a potential Jerami Grant to the Sacramento Kings deal. Now, you were mentioning this before the show. There's the date matters here. January 15th is the date that we should be circling for when, like, the trade deadline is February 8th, but January 15th is maybe a more key date than that.
Yeah, January 15th is a date that players that it's like a weird rule. So players that were signed because they re-signed using bird rights with 20% raises in salary, right?
Mhm.
And if their team is over the cap, they cannot be traded until January 15th.
Mhm.
And there's a handful of players like this around the league, including Jerami Grant, including D'Angelo Russell, which there may or may not be some rumors heating up with the Atlanta Hawks and Los Angeles Lakers. We'll have to wait and see how that all pans out. But there are a group of players. So December 15th is a day that players who in the offseason signed with new teams can be traded. But then there are other dates like where Harrison Barnes couldn't be traded until December 29th, because that was 6 months from the date that he signed his extension with the Kings. He signed it before, quote unquote, before free agency started, right? Because they still had his rights to do so. But then there's this other group of players that are signed and who make get a 20% pay increase. They can't be traded until January 15th. And so Jerami Grant falls into that because he's on his new extension.
So does DeJounte Murray, who's another player we've talked about for the Kings.
Yeah, I haven't seen.
Although I'm out on that.
DeJounte,
if I have a choice between those two, I think I'm going to go Jerami Grant. Although it feels very similar. Like all the reasons that I thought that DeJounte Murray makes sense for the Kings, I think Jerami Grant also makes sense. I think he's probably a little bit better in the... I think if you're Sacramento, adding a player who can play the 3-4 instead of the 2 and a little bit of 1 is preferable. So I lean Jerami Grant on that, especially if you're going to get plus defense and hustle from him. You're going to get a 40%. If they can replace Harrison Barnes without losing like his shooting, because he's shooting the heck out of the ball this year.
Yeah.
If you can get a equivalent shooter who's going to maybe create a little more off the dribble, be a little more of a playmaker off the bounce, and be a better defender, I think that makes the Kings pretty significantly better right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is a better player. I don't love the contract. Just because
he's expensive.
He's in his 29-year season right now, so you're basically going to have to pay for his 30, 31, 32, 33 years. I guess that's not bad as long as he maintains. He's also a player who didn't play a ton when he was young, so maybe the mileage on his body isn't as much. He's a guy that, again, comes into the league at 20, but doesn't play real substantial minutes until he's like 24. And it does matter. That fully does matter. I'd also say,
he turns 30 this year.
Yeah, he turns 30 this year. Yeah. So, but like, look, most NBA players continue to be really, really good for quite some time after that.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing, I know this is kind of like a weird, sneaky thing I'll throw in there. He also played during the 2019-20 season with the Denver Nuggets that lost in the Western Conference Finals. And the reason I bring this up is because that's sort of one of the first years at Jokic is Jokic. And so he's played with a big man like Sabonis. He knows how to play off of a big man like Sabonis. And, again, he's a good defender. He's long, he's athletic. He does a lot of cool things. Now, whether or not this ever materializes, who knows? Like, these are names that we hear, just like, how many times have we heard Kyle Kuzma in coordination with the Sacramento Kings? But this is something that, like, I think it's worth noting that you should probably keep your eyes out for, especially with Portland. What happened with Portland last night where they lost by 62.
Bro, real quick, 62 points.
62
points.
Yes.
If Oklahoma City scored 0 points in the second half, the Blazers would have won by 2. 62. That's being down 50.
Yeah.
Which is like that gets tweeted about, right? A team is down 50.
Yeah, the Kings were down 50 at home the other night.
Right. Okay. Now go there. Okay. Let's go back to that.
Okay.
Team goes up by a 50 burger. That is like rock bottom. 49. Okay. 50. Rock bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like you're not a bona fide scorer unless you hit 50. If you hit 49,
like, dang, you're
good.
Pretty good game. Pretty good. Same thing like Damian talked about yesterday, that 29-point scorer versus 30 points.
The 20 points for Sabonis.
Yes.
Sabonis going over the 20-point mark.
19.8 versus 20.0 is like, so anyways, 50. 40 is like, dang, you got murked. 30, you got 20. You're a couple buckets from being back in this.
Yeah.
Right. 50 though. Imagine being down 50. And then the other team goes on a 12-0 run. And then the game ends.
You know what happens in those games?
62 points.
Kyle, in those games, that's where I like, I don't know if people enjoy that I tweeted or not. Like, I know the other night I tweeted Kevin Huerter 3-ball, Kings within 40.
Yeah, that's funny. No, that's good. That's the only way you can get through that.
Yeah, it is. Like, if I have to sit there and watch it, I'm going to get snarky.
Right. Kings get a layup, slash the lead to whatever.
Yeah, it's dry humor, but I'm getting snarky on you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I'd also add the one other thing about Jerami Grant, which I did not think about before, is that hiding on that 2019-20 Denver Nuggets roster was a coach named Jordi Fernandez.
Oh.
Who was part of Michael Malone's staff. So again, these are sort of like the ties that bind. You want to like 6 degrees of separation type stuff where you're looking for like little connections. And again, if you're Jordi Fernandez and you're looking for a defensive upgrade, you know if he's a defensive upgrade or not. You know what you're getting with him. He was there for a year with him, but he knows. He played a lot of games, a lot of minutes. And I think even the Kings don't even care about the offense. They don't, at least not that. Like, realistically, you need to be concerned with how do you improve your defense? How do you defend?
Yes.
How do you stop the one team that you can't stop? And it's very clear. It's the Pelicans. You can't stop them. You have to find somebody to go to match up with them, because the last thing you want to be is a 4-5 matchup with them, or a 3-6. Like, and that
which is very much on the table.
Yeah, it's sitting right there. And you could see New Orleans saying, "Oh, we'll tank this last game so we can play the Kings in the first round."
Right.
That sounds good to us because they've mollywopped you like 4 times already. Yeah. They've just crushed you. Well, I think one time they lost by 5, but the rest of them, like, not really all that competitive. So you got to find somebody that can defend Brandon Ingram. I don't think there's anyone out there that you just go, "Hey, he's the Zion Williamson stopper."
Dude, seriously.
Like, the only way to do that is
a bank vault on a Roomba.
Yeah, exactly. Just you build a wall and you hope that he doesn't still sneak around the wall and do a left-handed layup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much does net rating matter to you? Individual net rating?
Well, it depends. Like,
most season.
Okay, so most stats like net rating and most stats like plus minus, they're not good in a small sample size. So I could imagine that, his net rating could be like so off the charts bad, but it's because they just lost a game by 62 points and he was part of that. And so you're going to have this issue with that. I'd like to see his net rating for his career. I'd like to see the net rating for him over a 4-year period or a 3-year period. But, it's one thing if again, Alex Len this season, he's like almost every game he plays in, he's a positive. And I think there are 3 games that he's played in where he's a negative. And he's a combined like -4 in those 3 games. The positive that he brings on the plus minus box is crazy. So you start to understand that a trend, he sort of defies a trend. It doesn't matter if he goes in a game when it's a blowout. It doesn't matter if he goes in the game, when it's closer, you're up 2. His impact is felt in almost every single game. Yeah. But you usually want a much larger sample size than just one season to rate a player.
He has now, granted, he has been on a lot of really bad teams. He has 2 seasons with a positive net rating.
Yeah. Oh, it's tough.
And those were 2 seasons where he had 2 of his lowest usage rates.
Yeah, I mean, I've always looked at him as a player that, number one, the Kings liked him when he was in Detroit and were interested in making a trade for him then.
But okay, I'm in here, and let me tell you why. I'm just looking at this from a numbers perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a positive net rating in 2017-18. He was a 1.7, and then in 2018-19 he was a 5.4 positive.
Okay.
With OKC.
Yep.
Since then, it has gone downhill pretty dramatically.
Okay.
But all of the years where his net rating is the worst, so 16, oh no, he only played 2 games in 16-17 with Philly. 16-17 total. Okay. This year, a 25.3 usage rate and a minus 12.5 net rating. In 21-22, he was 25.3 usage rate and a minus 7.8. So the years where his usage rates are the highest is when his net rating is the lowest.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see that usage rate of 25.3 plummet if he comes to Sacramento.
No, totally.
And that I think is a positive for Jerami Grant, because it's going to allow him to maximize what he's doing. They're not going to ask him to create a ton off the dribble. There's going to be times that they do. There's going to be times where they like a matchup for him and they're going to get him the ball and they're going to say, you go cook. But it's going to be a lot of hanging out in the corner. It's going to be a lot of leaking out and fast break buckets and open corner threes that we see Harrison Barnes get a lot of. And I think you see that usage rate dip, and I think you see his production climb because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that there are players we get. So we had the discussion yesterday about the Hall of Fame, right? Like whether Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox can be Hall of Famers, right? I hope that there comes a point with a player like Jerami Grant where you look at the fact that that's not who you are. You're not going to be a Hall of Famer. You don't all of a sudden at age 29 string together 5 years that weren't there before and become a Hall of Famer.
Right.
That's not the way this thing works. And so at that point in your career, you just got paid, right? You got a bunch of money, and that's good. Like you're set for life. You just got like what, 150 million over 5 years.
Yeah.
I think it's right around there, right? If you can accept that in order for you to be a
5 for 160. Go ahead.
Yeah, 5 for 160. If you can fit in and be a great role player on a very good to great team, okay. That's where you want the buy-in. And that is acknowledging that, like, look, whatever it is that I thought I could have been at one point, I'm not going to get there. And that's okay. But this is who I want to be, and this is how I can get to. I got my money. I got the contract there. I'm safe. I'm like, my next 5 years is going to be a lot of money coming in, right? I've set myself up for the rest of my life, maybe 2 generations, maybe 3. But you hope that a player goes, I'm willing to accept whatever it is that I need to be for a team now. And that's good, because that's what you're hoping. And if that's not who he is, it's like, okay.
That to me, as you say, that almost to me, if you're the Kings, has to be a bigger part of any calculus they're doing on who they want to acquire. Like that fit, and knowing that role, whatever role, if you're going to go get a player like Jerami Grant or DeJounte Murray's another player that we brought up earlier, or Kyle Kuzma or Zach LaVine, or pick the biggest name that we've talked about, it is the common thread to all of those is, well, would they accept this role?
Yeah.
Would they accept this role as a 4th option, maybe 3rd option with the starting lineup? And again, this is where my questions come in, because like Keegan Murray, if he's going to offensively be as aggressive as he's been the last couple of nights against Detroit and Charlotte, and that's one of the things I'm watching for tonight against a good team like Philly. I know it's no Joel Embiid, but if Keegan Murray is going to go out and on the road on national TV against a really good Philly team, go out and be that aggressive offensively, now I'm changing my mind about like, okay, what do I need from that player? So Jerami Grant, you're looking at 3rd, maybe 4th option, depending on Keegan Murray, depending on if he's on the floor with Malik Monk. Is he fine with that? Is he okay with that? Is he going to say, hey, I don't have the ball in my hands a ton, I'm going to go impact the game in other ways?
Kyle, I think it's like, this is a really interesting basketball discussion, right? Because you name 4 players, and of the 4 players, I would take Jerami Grant, because I think Jerami Grant is closer to the understanding of what a role player is. Where
that's a good point.
I think Kuzma, LaVine, DeJounte Murray, like I think that he is closer to like, okay, I
Mhm.
know who I am and what I am, and this is it. Also is because he's 29, right? So I think that that's part of it, but it also like I think for everyone out there, it should probably help you understand why it is the Kings were looking at Pascal Siakam so hard,
Mhm.
because Pascal Siakam instantly comes in, and he's your number 2 scorer,
Right.
and he will demand that, and he
Mhm.
will act accordingly, and that means that Domantas Sabonis becomes your 3rd best scorer, and if heaven forbid Keegan Murray decides he's going to be a really good scorer as well, now Domantas Sabonis might become your 4th best scorer,
Mhm.
and you start seeing how this thing becomes a really, really, really high end team, like very
Yeah.
quickly. Like again, if Malik Monk is your 5th best scorer on a team, and everyone knows what Malik Monk
Jeez.
can do, now you're starting to go, okay.
Right.
And it's not just like, oh, they're going to score 150 a night. It's not that. It's that on each and every night, you have 3 or 4 players that can bust somebody up for 30.
Yeah.
And that's just really tough to defend. And so it makes sense why the Kings would be looking at and willing to like really, go all in maybe on a guy like Pascal Siakam if he was going to stay. If he's not going to stay, it's a waste of your time. Get away
1000%.
from it.
Mhm.
But if not, if you think that there's a way that you could land a player like that, he's a much better player than Kyle Kuzma. He's a much better player than Jeremy Grant. The
Yeah.
problem is you're going to have to pay for that. And that's I think one of the problems that you have if you're the Kings. It's like, how do you fit all these guys in together? But also, like, it's why you also look at players who are locked in 3-year deals, 4-year deals, and can't say no. I don't want to re-sign with Sacramento.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you got traded there. Like,
great, you're staying.
this is your life now. Like, make the best of it. Like Kyle Kuzma, like it would be 3.5 seasons in Sacramento, barring the Kings trading him.
Mhm.
Again, Jeremy Grant, you just signed a 5-year deal. So he's in the first 6 months of a 5-year deal. He's got 4.5 years.
Right.
So you hope that he's going to be good that whole time and that he's going to be willing to accept that role. But, a championship teams have players like Jeremy Grant on them.
Yeah. And this is the key. This is what you're saying. They have players like Jeremy Grant in roles that they're probably overqualified for.
Yeah.
Like we talk about the Nuggets a lot because A, they're the defending champs, and B, I think they're kind of the gold standard for team building.
I think
right
it's
now.
a perfect discussion right now. It's the Denver Nuggets.
Aaron Gordon is vastly overqualified for what Aaron Gordon is doing for the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, but
from a like, hey, on a team, what's the most he can do production wise? He is way overqualified to be a defender, scrappy, diving on the floor for loose balls, playing really good defense. Like, he was a number 1 in Orlando. Like,
yeah.
He was the dude in Orlando. And then he goes and he takes this backseat to Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. And now he's like the 4th option, sometimes the 5th, depending on what KCP is doing.
Mm-hmm.
He was certainly the 5th when Bruce Brown was on the floor. That's what a Jeremy Grant type of player would need to be for the Kings, where you're looking and going, wow, Jeremy Grant is the defense and hustle guy. He could be scoring 20 a night, but he's getting you 13 or 14 a night and playing really good defense and getting rebounds, which I know he hasn't done a ton of, blocking a few shots, altering shots at the rim, being that type of player. That's where he becomes a piece of a championship team, is when he is, to me, overqualified for the role that he's going to be in. And I think when you bring that up, closing lineup, let's talk this.
Yeah.
De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, Jeremy Grant, Domas.
Yeah.
Right. He is the 5th scoring option in an ideal world. And that's not to disparage Jeremy Grant. That's to say, hey, if Jeremy Grant in that lineup is the 5th option because everybody else is playing that well, now that's a really, really dangerous team.
No, I think so. And also, like, if you just look at the pure matchups against a team like Denver, Denver is the cream of the crop. They are the best team in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
I don't care
maybe the league.
I don't care what the stats say right now. Yeah, maybe in the league because, hey, they won the championship last year, right? And your point with Aaron Gordon, like, Aaron Gordon's doing whatever he's having to do because he just got a ring and because he saw the pathway to the ring. Yep. The pathway to ring is to make sure that Jokic is protected. It's to save Jokic. and allow him to do what he does, because you're an incredible team when you allow him to do what he does. Right. And that's where the Kings have to figure out how to protect Sabonis so he can be the same thing. But all of a sudden, if I'm looking at this team, I can see Keegan Murray matching up with Michael Porter Jr. I can see Jerami Grant matching up with Aaron Gordon. I can see De'Aaron Fox is a better player than Jamal Murray. You're still going to have to figure out that shooting guard spot, but I think Denver's still figuring out their shooting guard spot as well, especially long term. And then you have the center matchup. Like, you're designing a team almost exactly like the Denver Nuggets. Like, are some pieces better than other pieces? Like, if we're rating them on each position, but you're much closer. And that's where I think the Kings have been lacking that forward to get them to that point. And it's not a knock on Harrison Barnes as much as it is like, look, Harrison Barnes does not have a 7'3" wingspan. And every other team has a guy with a 7'3" wingspan. And Harrison Barnes is not that guy. It's not that he does anything wrong. It's that he can't do some of the things that you need him to do, like defend an Ingram, like defend Michael Porter Jr. when he gets on fire. Like, those are things that you need. And until the Kings find that guy, that's why I don't think that they're considered a championship contending team, because they don't have that guy that can do that.
I am in lockstep with you on that. It is not, it's not to disparage Harrison Barnes or say Harrison Barnes stinks, but like, the Kings have just kind of outgrown what he does for them. They are looking to go beyond. Harrison Barnes was great, ushering in a new culture and knocking down some threes for them and being a switchable player that Mike Brown can kind of move around, and allowing him to integrate Keegan Murray without putting too much on his plate. Like, Harrison Barnes was an integral piece last year. He has taken this season. That's why they re-signed him. This season, he has taken a little bit of a step back. And it's clear the Kings are trying to move forward, and they're hitting a little bit of a ceiling, not solely because of Harrison Barnes, but when you look at reasons they're hitting that ceiling, to me, a little bit of it is because of number 40. And so if you can get the role that he plays and what they need out of that position, he's not able to give it to them.
It's because he's miscast, but yes, right. I agree with you. And like, I always go back to this point real quickly before we go to a break.
Yeah.
Like, there was a point where the Kings traded Jason Williams, one of the most electric players in the league, for Mike Bibby. And it's just because they were different. The need for the team was a player like Mike Bibby who was stable in his position. It was not the flamboyant passing and craziness of Jason Williams. And if you who would you rather choose to be on your team at that point in time? It'd probably be Jason Williams. But if you want to take the next step, sometimes it's just a different player.
Yeah,
it's not a player that's better or worse. It's a player that's different.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, we've kind of run into it with Harrison Barnes. They need something different, and he can't provide that. And it's not on him as much as it is just the way this team is organically grown.